3 nights ago, I was on shift at St. Mary's Hospital. I'm a 32-year-old nurse, so I'm used to the late hours. I was tired but pushing through like usual. The night was quiet at first. The lights flickered a few times, but that happens sometimes. It's an old building. I was doing rounds when I first heard the cries. They came from room 213. I thought maybe a patient needed help. I walked over and knocked on the door. The whispers got louder but still weren't clear. I hesitated. Finally, I opened the door, but the room was empty. My skin crawled, and I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't stick around for long. A couple hours later, I went back to check on the room again. The whispers were softer this time, almost like they were teasing me. I thought maybe I was just exhausted or imagining things. I walked down the hall, trying to shake it off. That's when I saw the wheelchair. It was just sitting in the corridor, facing a wall. I felt uneasy. No one had been in that area. I moved the wheelchair back to its place, glancing around. I swear I felt eyes on me, but I couldn't see anyone. Maybe someone was playing games, I thought. It made me hurry back to the nurse's station. The lights flickered more as the night went on. I walked into a patient's room, and the light went out. I flicked the switch, and it came back on. Weird, right? I shrugged it off then, but felt sweat trickle down my back. Something was off. Later, I met a new patient. She sat in bed looking terrified. Her eyes darted around and her breaths were quick. I asked her if she was okay. "He's coming," she kept whispering, her voice shaking. I tried to help her calm down, but it seemed to make her worse. I stepped outside to get the doctor. It took only a minute, but when I returned, she was gone. Just her empty bed remained, the sheets neatly folded. I didn't know what to think. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. It tied into those whispers and flickering lights. I wanted to tell someone, but what would I say? Maybe I was just tired. I had to keep going. I couldn't let this affect my job. Before my shift ended, I walked back by room 213. The door was slightly ajar. The whispers were louder now, almost angry. I tried to peer inside but didn't see anything. I felt a pull to walk in, but I held back. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I knew I had one more round to make before I could leave. I was anxious to finish my shift. I stepped away from that room, but before I could turn the corner, I looked back. The door swung shut by itself. Now I'm back at home, 3 nights later, wondering if I imagined it all. I can still hear those whispers. Every time I close my eyes, I see shadows lurking near room 213. I can't shake the feeling that something is waiting for me. Something no one wants to remember. I hardly slept that night. I tossed and turned, haunted by the events at the hospital. As dawn broke, I decided I couldn't just ignore it. I had to go back, even if it terrified me. Maybe I could find answers, or at least something to calm my swirling thoughts. When I arrived at St. Mary's, the hospital felt different in the light of day. Shadows from yesterday seemed to retreat into corners. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The faint smell of antiseptic filled the air, but it felt comforting rather than oppressive this time. I headed to the nurse's station, determined to act normal. As I settled in, I overheard a couple of nurses gossiping about room 213. I leaned in closer, pretending to sort through charts. "They say it's haunted," one nurse chuckled. "Some even reported seeing people who aren't there." I tried to play it cool, but my heart raced. I had been dismissed as tired or imagining things, but suddenly, I wasn't alone in my fear. I waited for the others to leave the area, then made my way down the hall. Room 213 stood at the end of the corridor, and its door was still ajar. This time, though, I felt a strange pull, like a magnetic force drawing me closer. I crept toward it, my palms sweaty against the cool railing. The whispers began again, clearer than before. "Help us!" I froze, caught between terror and the urge to help. There was no one around. I took a step inside, and the room was exactly how I'd left it, neat and untouched. But then, something caught my eye. A small, crumpled note lay on the floor next to the bed. I picked it up, my hands trembling. In messy handwriting it read, "Get out. He's coming for you." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a prank anymore. This was a warning. My heart raced. As I stood there in that eerie silence, I heard a soft shuffling behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just the phantom weight of the empty room pressing in on me. I blinked hard, as if I could clear my mind and make sense of everything. That's when I saw it. A figure in the corner, barely illuminated by the dim light. It looked like a patient, a woman with hollow cheeks and wide, pleading eyes. She was staring directly at me. My pulse quickened, and I fought the urge to scream. The electricity crackled in the air, a sense of danger enveloping me like a heavy fog. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled backward, bumping into the door, which swung shut with a soft thud. The whispers turned into frantic shouts, echoing in my ears. "Help us!" I bolted for the exit, almost tripping over my own feet. I needed to get out of that room, out of that cursed hallway. As I burst through the door, I hit the cold tile of the floor like a wave crashing against the shore. But before I could reach safety, a hard grip caught my arm. I turned, my heart in my throat, ready to confront whatever waited behind me. "Are you okay?" It was a fellow nurse, her concern masking the dread that was settling in my stomach. But that relief lasted only a moment as I noticed she was looking just past me. I followed her gaze back to room 213. The door stood wide open now, gently swinging as if welcoming me back inside. Frozen in terror, I was not alone. "He's here," the nurse whispered. I gasped, knowing I had to know what was in that room. But my feet wouldn't move. Just then, behind the open door, I saw a shadow shift again. This time, it wasn't a ghost. It was something much worse. My instincts screamed for me to run, but I stood paralyzed. The nurse glanced nervously at me, and her grip on my arm tightened. "We need to get out of here," she insisted. But the pull of the room was too strong. "Did you see that?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. "The shadow—" "I didn't see anything," she interrupted, her eyes darting back to the door. "Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. Let's just go." But I couldn't leave. Not now. Something compelled me to stay, to know what was happening in there. I shook off her hold and took a hesitant step toward the open door. "Wait," she pleaded. "You can't go in there." Ignoring her, I approached room 2113. It felt like every shadow in the hallway was pulling me inside. I took a deep breath, heart pounding, and pushed the door wide open. The room smelled of antiseptic, but it was mixed with something else, an underlying scent of decay. I stepped inside. The air felt heavier, charged. I looked around, half expecting to see the same woman from before. But the room was empty. The bed was made, the curtains drawn, and the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. But something felt off. That's when I noticed a small drawer beneath the bedside table. It was slightly ajar. My breath caught in my throat as I knelt down to pull it open. Inside, I found a collection of photographs, dozens of them, all depicting the same patient. The woman with hollow cheeks. In every photo, her eyes were filled with an emotion I couldn't place. Despair, anger, maybe both. My fingers trembled as I flipped through them, and each one sent a chill through me. Then, at the bottom of the pile, I found a newspaper clipping. It was dated 5 years ago. A headline screamed, "Mysterious Deaths Linked to St. Mary's." My heart sank as I read the article. It described a series of unexplained deaths linked to room 213, including the name of the woman in the pictures. "Why is this here?" I muttered to myself, feeling suddenly nauseous. Just then, I heard the unmistakable creak of the door behind me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The nurse was gone. I was alone. Before I could move, the temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath. The shadows in the corners deepened and swirled. "Get out," a voice whispered, echoing the words from the note I'd found yesterday. Panic surged through me as I stumbled back. This was no longer just a curiosity. It was a warning. I had to leave. But the whispers grew louder. "He's coming!" Suddenly, the light flickered violently. It was as if something was fighting to break through the thin veil of reality. I steadied myself against the wall, trying to breathe through the panic. I had to focus. Then I noticed the photographs again. One of the images caught my eye. Holding it closer, I gasped. The woman wasn't alone. In the corner of the photo stood a man, his face blurred but unmistakably angry. Realization hit me like a punch. He was the figure I had seen or felt in the room. I needed answers, but curiosity felt like a trap. Just as I turned to escape, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and deliberate. They stopped, and for a moment, silence enveloped me. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. But I knew already. The heaviness in the air grew thicker. The figure was here, and it was coming for me. I froze, my heart racing as the footsteps drew closer. I had to make a decision. I could feel the presence behind me, heavy and suffocating. Resolution flared within me. I wouldn't be a victim. I spun around, ready to confront whatever haunted this room. But there was nothing, empty space and shadows. My breath quickened, and dread crept back. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, though even I didn't believe it. Silence. Then the air shifted. A low murmur filled the space, like a chant from another world. "Leave. Now." The voice reverberated off the walls and clawed at my skin. I took a step back, heart hammering in my chest. My mind raced. I remembered the nurse's warning, the photographs, and the newspaper article. I had to get out of here. I turned and sprinted for the door. My foot caught on the edge of the rug and I stumbled, bracing myself against the wall. A sudden chill rushed past me. I felt it, an arm reaching out, invisible fingers grazing my shoulder. I whipped around again, but still nothing. "Get out!" I gasped, urging myself to move, pushing through the doorway with every ounce of strength. I sprinted down the hall, heart pounding louder with each step. The fluorescent lights flickered in sync with my panic, casting disorienting shadows. As I rushed toward the nurse's station, I glanced back. Was I being followed? For a split second, I thought I saw a figure in the corner, just beyond the door I had come from. A man, his face twisted in anger. I shook my head, willing myself to focus. The nurse had to be somewhere nearby, just a few more steps. But as I approached the station, the lights flickered once more, and they went dark. I stumbled to a halt, panic flooding my system. "No, no, no," I muttered, fingers fumbling for my phone in my pocket. The small light from the screen illuminated my trembling hands, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness aside from the faint outlines of furniture. "Help!" I called out, my voice cracking. "Please!" Suddenly the light snapped back on, and I found myself staring at the nurse, panic etched across her face. "What's happening?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I saw him, the man in the photographs," I exclaimed, breathing heavily. "He's here!" Her expression shifted, confusion mixing with fear as she stepped closer. "What do you mean? There's no one here but us." I opened my mouth to respond when the lights flickered again, and the shadows deepened as the temperature dropped once more. The voice returned, low and menacing. "You shouldn't have come back." I turned to the nurse, her face pale, and I whispered, "We need to leave. Now." But as I moved to grab her arm, the lights began to flicker violently, then went dark once again. Everything stopped. The whispers ceased. A heavy silence filled the air, and then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I felt a sudden surge of dread as the voices returned, faint but unmistakable. "He's coming for you. Both of you." Before I could react, the lights flooded back on. But there was no time to scream. The figure stood just behind the nurse, a dark silhouette looming over her shoulder. For a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of his twisted face, filled with rage. "Run!" I screamed, but it was already too late. I lunged toward the closest exit, adrenaline surging through my veins. My feet pounded the floor, desperate to escape the horror I could feel pursuing us. "Keep moving!" I yelled at the nurse, who looked frozen, her wide eyes fixed on the dark figure. I didn't care if she believed me. All that mattered was getting away. We dashed down the corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering above us like a malfunctioning heartbeat. The sound of those footsteps followed, echoing ominously in the stillness. The nurse finally jolted into action, sprinting alongside me, though I could see the fear twisting her features. "Which way?" she gasped, panting heavily. "There's a stairwell at the end," I shouted back, already steering us toward the faint emergency exit sign glimmering in the distance. But as we approached, the temperature dropped, a frigid wind sweeping through the hall. The lights flickered more violently now, and shadows stretched along the walls in grotesque shapes. "Don't look back," I urged, but my instincts compelled me to glance over my shoulder. The figure had vanished, but I could feel his presence, a thick aura of malice hanging in the air. "Hurry!" I urged again as we reached the door to the stairwell. We burst through the door, and I slammed it shut behind us, praying it would hold whatever was hunting us. The sound of my heart pounding echoed off the concrete walls. We took a moment to catch our breath, leaning against the cool metal railing. But suddenly, the emergency lights flickered on, and I froze. A chill swept through me. Those whispers returned, clearer this time, more furious. "Get out. Now." I shook my head, unwilling to believe what was happening. I needed answers, not just escape. "What was that? Why is he after us?" I asked the nurse, voice trembling. She looked as shaken as I felt. "I don't know. I remember stories from the old staff, about a patient who died here long ago. He was unstable." She hesitated. "They said he couldn't rest until he found peace." I could almost hear the frantic whispers in my mind again. "He's not at peace," I muttered, piecing things together. "We have to learn who he was, what happened to him." Suddenly the door rattled violently, sending shudders through my body. I whipped my head around just in time to see the doorknob twist, the heavy door bulging inward. "He knows we're here," I gasped. With no time to waste, I grabbed the nurse's arm and pulled her toward the stairs. "Come on. We need to go up. We can't let him find us here." We climbed quickly, 2 flights up, fear propelling us to the roof access. I fumbled with the door handle, finally pushing it open and stumbling into the bitter night air. The rooftop was quiet, the city lights twinkling far below us, but as I turned to catch my breath, something caught my eye. A figure stood by the edge, silhouetted against the skyline. I squinted, heart racing. It was him. The man from the photographs, staring out into the void. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice shaky. He turned slowly to face me, rage flickering in his eyes. And then, just like that, he vanished. "Where did he go?" I gasped, trembling. But I didn't have to wait long for an answer. The rooftop door slammed open behind us, and the nurse screamed as shadows danced across the ground, closing in around us. I realized then, we were not safe at all. The shadows swirled around us, thickening like a storm cloud. I locked eyes with the nurse, her face pale and panicked. "We need to find cover!" I shouted, scanning the roof for anything that could hide us from the looming threat. "Over there!" She pointed towards an old service shed at the far end. Its door hung ajar, and urgency surged through me as we sprinted toward it. The wind howled, whipping our hair around our faces, adding to the chaos in my mind. We stumbled into the cramped space, the scent of rust and decay filling my nostrils. I pushed the door mostly shut, just enough to conceal us but still allow a sliver of light in. The flimsy door bucked against the force of the wind, and I braced it with my body. I could hear the distant echoes of footsteps, now dangerously close. "Do you think he saw us?" the nurse whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I don't know," I said, straining to listen. "But I doubt we're alone." Just then, something scratched against the door. I felt my blood run cold. The sound sent shivers down my spine, thickening the air around us. Another scratch. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. "Stay quiet," I hissed, holding my breath. The whispers from the stairwell surged in my mind again. "Leave. Now." It felt urgent, frantic. The memories of the photographs flashed through my mind. That face, lost in torment. With a sudden push, the door creaked open slightly, and I realized it wasn't just the wind. Something was trying to pry it open from the outside. My instincts kicked in. I pressed against the door with all my strength, but it had become a losing battle. "Help me," I cried out, my voice rising in fear as the nurse rushed to my side. We shoved against the door together, but our combined strength was barely enough to hold back the growing pressure. Then, it stopped. The scratching ceased, and an unsettling silence enveloped us. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced at the nurse. Her wide eyes mirrored my own dread. "Maybe it went away," she suggested. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "I don't think so." My gut twisted painfully as I remembered the figure from the rooftop. That dark presence had not vanished. It was still close. The door swung open violently, crashing against the wall. A figure loomed in the doorway, its features shrouded in darkness. I couldn't distinguish a face, but I felt the rage radiating off of him like heat. My breath caught in my throat. "Run!" I screamed to the nurse. Without hesitation, I charged past the figure, shoving it aside as I darted into the open air of the rooftop. I glanced back just in time to see the nurse hesitate, her expression frozen in horror. "Go!" I shouted at her again. She finally turned and took off behind me, but the figure followed, still lurking in the shadows, intent and silent. We raced toward the edge of the roof, a desperation pushing us on. That's when I saw it, the fire escape ladder hanging down into the abyss below. "There," I pointed, panic fueling my legs. We could escape down that, but the figure was gaining on us, gliding silently yet quickly. Just as we reached the ladder, I felt a cold draft swirl through me, the whispers crescendoed, filling my mind. "He's coming for you." I grabbed the ladder and began my descent, the metal rungs slick and treacherous under my fingers. I glanced back. The nurse was right behind me, but there was no way to tell how close the figure was. As I reached the last few rungs, my foot slipped. I gasped, barely catching myself before I fell. I would not let the darkness win, not now. Then something caught my eye, a flash of white in the gloom. A crumpled piece of paper floated down from the rooftop above. My pulse quickened. What was that? I wondered breathlessly. I could see the nurse land safely on the ground, looking up at me in confusion, just as the figure stepped out of the shadows, his eyes glowing like embers in the night. I found myself frozen, staring at that paper, like it held the key to everything. But I had to move. Before I could think, I jumped down, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The answers could wait. Survival came first. But what I didn't know was that what awaited us below was just as terrifying as what was chasing us. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet as I landed. I glanced back at the rooftop, where the figure's shadow loomed, dark and menacing against the dim light. Fear clawed at my chest, but I had to focus. I turned to the nurse, who still looked bewildered. "Did you see it?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Yeah, it was—" "I don't even know," she replied, her brow furrowed with concern. She glanced up as if expecting the figure to rush down after us at any moment. "What do we do now?" I scanned the area. We were in an empty alley, surrounded by walls that seemed to close in on us. There was little in the way of shelter. "We need to find a way inside," I said, searching for an entrance to the hospital or any building nearby. "Somewhere we can lock the doors." Just then, a loud crash echoed from above. I jumped, instinctively tugging the nurse down behind a dumpster, out of sight. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know, but we can't stay here." I pushed up, spotting a side entrance to the hospital. The door was slightly ajar, inviting us with a glimmer of safety. I grabbed her hand and we hurried toward it, my heart racing as I heard distant noises behind us. Inside, things were eerily quiet. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, creating unsettling shadows that danced along the walls. I closed the door behind us and locked it, stepping back to catch my breath. "Okay, what now?" the nurse asked, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't have an answer. A part of me wanted to run back to the exit, but the thought of the dark figure pursuing us made my skin crawl. "Let's find a room. Somewhere we can hide," I suggested, leading her down a dimly lit corridor. As we moved deeper into the hospital, I kept peering behind us, half expecting to see that figure's glowing eyes gleaming in the dark. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant beeping of machines and the faint hum of the air conditioning. Memories of the prior night's events flooded back, and the feeling that I was being watched intensified. I opened the door to a nearby room and stepped inside, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The nurse followed, and I turned to shut the door when I noticed something on the floor. It was the same crumpled piece of paper I had seen fall earlier. My heart raced as I bent down to pick it up. "Do you think it's important?" she asked, looking over my shoulder. I unfolded it carefully, revealing a hastily scrawled message. "Don't trust them. They seek what you have." My pulse quickened. What did that even mean? The world outside just got a lot darker. Before I could respond, a loud bang echoed through the corridor, shaking the door. The nurse gasped, her eyes darting toward the sound. "Move!" I yelled, shoving the paper into my pocket and rushing to the far side of the room. The walls felt like they were closing in as we searched for another exit. Then I heard something else, a whisper, soft yet clear. "You shouldn't be here." My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind, or if there really was something sinister about this place. I looked at the nurse, panic rising in my throat. "We have to get out. Now!" Just as I reached for the door, it swung open, and 2 hospital staff members burst in, their faces pale and drawn. Panic flashed in their eyes, and they looked straight past me, towards the hallway. "There's no time! We need to move!" one shouted, yanking us by the arms. As we stumbled after them, I glanced back. Just at the edge of the doorway, that dark figure stood watching us, a predatory smile on its lips. That's when I realized. I thought we had escaped, but we might have just walked right into a trap. The staff pulled us through the doorway and into the corridor, their grip tight and urgent. I could hear the echoes of footsteps behind us, growing louder. "Please, just tell us what's happening," I yelled over my shoulder, desperation creeping into my voice. "Not now! Just run!" one of them shouted, leading us further down the hall. The bright lights above flickered, casting quick shadows that danced ominously along the walls. My heart raced as I felt the urgency of our situation sink in. We turned a corner and entered a stairwell, the air filled with a musty smell. I glanced at the nurse, who looked pale and shaken. "Stay close," I whispered, hoping my voice could convey some semblance of reassurance. They led us down, and with each step, I felt a mixture of fear and confusion. "What are we running from?" I demanded, hoping for some clarity. "There's no time for explanations," one staff member said, breathless. "Just trust us." Trust. That word echoed in my mind, heavy with doubt. I thought back to the paper in my pocket, the warning, the hint of danger. My instincts screamed that we were in deeper trouble than I had first realized. We reached the basement level, and they pushed open another door, revealing a dimly lit room filled with equipment. A few hospital beds were scattered about, and medical supplies were piled high on shelves. I stood frozen for a moment as panic rose within me again. "Lock it," the other staff member urged, pointing at the door we just entered. I rushed to close it, fumbling with the latch as I glanced at the windows. They were barred, and I could barely see outside due to the grime. "Where are we?" I asked, urgency in my tone. "Safe," one of them replied, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted toward the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. "We just need a minute." A loud bang echoed again, but this time it was different, like a fist against metal. The nurse jumped, her eyes wide. "What was that?" she gasped. The staff members exchanged nervous glances. "It's—" One of them started but was cut off by another crash, the door shuddering in its frame. My breath caught in my throat, realizing just how vulnerable we were. "Look, we're here to help, but you have to listen," the first staff member said, stepping closer. "There are forces at play that you don't understand, things that should never have awakened." "What do you mean?" I felt my pulse quicken, mixing fear with a desperate need for answers. "What are you talking about?" He stepped back, glancing at the door. "The figure you saw, it's part of it. You have something it wants." Panic washed over me. The crumpled paper suddenly felt heavier in my pocket, its warning echoing in my mind. "What do I have?" I whispered. "Stay calm," the nurse urged, but I could see her fear mirrored in my own expression. Then everything went quiet. The sounds of chaos outside faded, replaced by an unbearable stillness. I exchanged looks with the staff members, unsure of what was happening. That's when the lights flickered again, and the shadows began to move. "Someone's coming," one of them whispered, and dread settled in my stomach. We were not safe here. Then the door rattled violently, and a voice I didn't recognize called from the other side. "Let us in. We can help you." Suddenly, I realized the truth. Our escape had led us into a much larger mystery, and this night was nowhere near over. I pressed my back against the cold metal door, heart racing, sweat trickling down my brow. A heavy knock echoed again, vibrating through the room. My instinct screamed to stay quiet, to deny entry, but the desperation in the voice outside did something else. "Please, we can help," it repeated. There was urgency, yes, but also something familiar. It sounded like a former patient, someone I had met in passing. "I know you're in there." "What do we do?" I whispered to the staff members, my voice shaking. They exchanged glances, their fear palpable. "Just keep the door shut," one of them insisted, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The figure was close enough now that I could hear it breathing, ragged and frantic. Behind us, the little room felt smaller, a box closing in as anxiety pressed on me. I wanted to bolt, to run again, but there was nowhere to go. "Listen!" The voice outside was louder, frantic. "If you don't let me in, we're all dead. I swear it." The staff huddled together, murmuring to each other quietly, framed by the flickering lights. Then one of them turned to me, a decision clearly made. "We need to move. We can't stay here, not anymore." "What? Are you out of your mind?" I shot back, almost laughing through my panic. "And go where? It'll find us." "Trust us," they said again, less confident this time. "We're not safe until we are out in the corridor." But as they moved toward the door to peer through the small barred window, I felt a jolt of fear. The urgency in the voice outside grew sharper, turning into a shriek. "They're coming! Let me in! You have to let me in!" I felt my throat tighten. "Who's coming?" I demanded, my voice rising above the chaos around us. The nurse stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "Please, just wait a moment. We can't decide this now." Then the lights flickered one last time before going out, plunging us into darkness. My heart thudded in my chest as whispers filled the void. "Quick, we need to move," one of the staff shouted. Everything felt suddenly more urgent, the silence laden with the weight of things unseen. The door was still rattling violently, and I could hear footsteps approaching from the direction we had just come. My instincts told me to hide, to find the darkest corner and make myself small. But I was stuck, frozen in fear. "I couldn't get it open!" The arrival outside pounded on the door again. A soft scratching began now, like nails dragging against metal. "Let me in, please." I grabbed the nurse's arm tightly, my breath shallow. "We can't let them in," I urged. "What if it's not who we think it is?" The staff member who had initially tried to reassure us was at the door, trying to process. Just then, I could hear, from the other corridor, a guttural growl, deep and menacing. The staff member realized it too, their face draining color. "We can't stay here. Move!" They kicked open the door, just as the scratching grew louder. And in that moment, I saw something flicker in the shadows. A fleeting glimpse of an outline, dark and twisted. A flash of fear swept over me. That's when I saw it. A figure was rushing toward us, and before I could react, it was already inside. Everything went dark as screams filled the air, and the last thing I felt was a jolt of terror as we were pulled into an all-consuming night. The jumbled chaos of screams echoed in my ears, a cacophony of fear that enveloped me like a fog. I stumbled backwards, heart racing, though I couldn't tell where I was going. I felt the cold steel of the door behind me, and it gave way to a small alcove, a corner that felt both familiar and terrifying at the same time. Everything was confusion. Shadows dancing like phantoms, whispers filling the space, and a sense of dread that made it hard to breathe. A flash of light cut through the darkness. Was it a memory or an illusion? The shrouded figure had emerged, its features cloaked by the dim light, but the intensity of its gaze felt all-consuming. The air thickened. I could almost hear the weight of its anger pressing down on us. The staff members fought against whatever was pushing in from outside, their faces strained and pale. "Get back!" one of them yelled, throwing his weight against the door. But the darkness surged forward as if hungry, like a torrent seeking to consume every light left in the room. Everything seemed to stretch into slow motion as I turned, grappling with both the tangible world and the ethereal whispers. They were beckoning, begging. He's coming. He's coming for you. Go! I screamed, shoving doctors aside, adrenaline flaring. We need to escape, but every exit felt like a trap. One of the staff members reached for the door handle, but the oppressive force threw him back, sending him spiraling to the floor. No! I shouted, panic mounting. We can't let him have you! Suddenly, out of nowhere, I felt a hand clasp tightly around my wrist. I spun around, ready to confront another shadow, but it was the nurse. Her face was etched with desperation, but also a strange calm that sent a shiver through me. We have to find another way out. We can't let it take anyone else. With a fierce nod, we turned and pushed through an overlooked part of the room, a door I hadn't initially noticed, its wood damp and grimy. I grasped the handle and pulled with all my might. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow stairwell that spiraled downwards into darkness. The shadows lingered in the doorway behind us, and as if sensing our intent to flee, they curled and writhed with a primal pulse. I could just make out murmurs rising from deep within the abyss, frantic voices repeating the same warnings over and over. Get out, before he finds you. Come on, the nurse urged, and we rushed toward the stairwell. We could already hear the figure clawing its way back through the chaos, its growls resonating through the walls, echoing our collective fear. We descended quickly, the atmosphere growing chillier with each step. The glow of emergency lights flickered on and off above us, illuminating snapshots of the wall. Old pictures of the hospital now discolored and ripped, memories of lives once lived. My heart raced with a strange mixture of dread and determination. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a dimly lit basement, filled with old equipment and discarded medical supplies. I scanned the room, looking for any signs of safety. A row of empty patient beds lined one wall, and in a dusty corner, I noticed a pile of boxes. Over here! I motioned for the nurse, and we scurried toward the pile, shoving the boxes together in a desperate attempt to create a makeshift blockade. Do you think it'll hold? She asked, breath hitching as the low growl from above intensified. Even as I hesitated, the hunger in those whispers made my resolve firm. It has to. We backed away as the shadows moved beneath the door, twisting like snakes. Our breath quickened, a collective beating of fear and defiance. For moments that felt like hours, we waited, clinging to the silence of the storeroom. Then, the door rattled violently, and I knew it wouldn't hold much longer. Prepare yourself, I said as I grasped her hand. Decision was all we had left to cling to now. When that door opens, we charge past and keep running. Before she could respond, there was a loud crash, and the door burst open. The figure loomed in the doorway, a grotesque spectacle that sent us flying into survival mode. Now! I cried, and we collided with the wall of shadows, pushing against the malevolent energy that seemed to rear back before reclaiming its grip. We sprinted past the figure, past the darkness that gave voice to our fears, and into the blinding light that flooded the corridor beyond. I didn't look back, focusing only on the exit ahead, sunlit and inviting. Somehow we made it through the labyrinth of hallways that led us back to the main lobby, the brightness of day streaming in through those massive doors. As we burst through, the cool breezes of the afternoon sky rushed over us, but ironically, I was acutely aware of something still missing. I glanced over my shoulder at the building, a twisted entity standing firm, not having given up. I couldn't shake the feeling that what we'd escaped wasn't finished. I turned my eyes to the nurse. Her breaths were shallow but determined. We've got to tell the others what happened. They need to know. She nodded, but I noticed a flicker of doubt in her eyes. What if they don't believe us? All we can do is try, I whispered resolutely, still regretting that crumpled piece of paper that somehow contained the essence of what had been. But even as we left, I felt the weight of that darkness behind us, lurking, silent, but ever watching. I didn't know if this night had revealed a new reality, or if those whispers would ever truly end. The truth was, I found hope in our survival. Yes, but there would always be a question lingering. What were the shadows after? And would they ever stop coming for me?